Another draft science video presentation. Anyway, Daftloday has made a video. I'll play some of it, I suppose, but there's probably no point. Just more petty nonsense. And in light of the fact that, right, he makes a video where he says something like, well, it's nice to have a civil exchange. And then I make a video saying this in the beginning of the video. Oops, I can't click on it there, Gary. Oh, okay. Do it in here. Yeah, do it in there. Alright, draft physics video. Off the day response, sort of. We'll put in the usual category. This wasn't quite as rude, but so it's more on just. Yes, so it's more on the subject and blah blah blah. So I basically said, look, yeah, I won't bother with the Daftloday bullshit. We won't have to do this little nonsense and blah 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 and all the little petty shit. We can, avoid that for a little bit. How about that? And what does he do? The next response video is this crap. Here. It's just so gratuitously, uselessly vacuous in the sense that it's just the same. He doesn't even know how to make a joke. I mean, a joke is like 2 minutes long, not 11 minutes of the same joke over and over again. I mean, yeah, idiot draft science just says them other scientists is wrong. Yeah, they're just wrong. He doesn't sit there and make arguments, that you haven't responded to. I mean, I certainly could make a video and just take some clips of you with your dopey face, and I could just ask all the questions you haven't answered, and watch you just, I don't know. Aren't all good scientific articles? Don't they all have faked photographs in them? Doesn't everybody know that faking photographs is the way you do great science? I mean, just, is that all you want to do? I mean, it's just, I find that totally useless, actually. As I'm saying, I'm really seeking arguments, where you actually can explain something and say, hey, there's the explanation, and it's solid. But you haven't been able to do that. So anyway, before I get to that, I'll get to a new observation I found curious. I'm liking my polarization argument more and more. It explains so many things. The idea that the tons are not on the same, they're not following exactly behind each other. They're a little bit off. And the more they're off, and radio waves are like that. They're got much more spread. That's why you can't cram it through a hole or something. It just doesn't. But anyway, let's go to this other new thing, which should be here somewhere. Where the hell is it? I went there, so it should be here. There it is. Yay! All right, that should be showing up. Let me make sure. Yeah, looks very good. Yeah, very nice. Alright, so these are different apertures. When the cowboy said it doesn't matter and blah blah blah. Clearly very interesting. So it's not exactly the slit experiment, but obviously some similarities to the idea of what's going on. And what's very curious is the odd-sided objects create twice as many little lines as the even-sided objects. So the ones that are producing the effect on two parallel planes are superimposing over each other, apparently. And so it's only ones with the odd sides that are, so the point is that the surface appears to cause the diffraction in both directions. So that would be the obvious interpretation, the simplest interpretation. The off the top of your head interpretation is, oh yeah, well, each surface makes the line going that way and a line going this way, and that would account for the 6 lines for the triangle and only 4 lines for the square, because these two lines superimpose over each other because the apertures are really small, and so the distance they'll be off is very small, so they'll be very close to each other, very close to the same. And this might explain the difference between the 2-slit experiment having a different size central maxima, smaller, than the single slit. It's because of some of these overlap kind of arguments. haven't really thought that through, but there's probably some connection. And you can sort of see that the center spot, as you get more and more sides, the center does get bigger and bigger, kind of indicating that they're having more and more of these overlaps, and the more overlaps you have, the center is more and more less discernible. I mean, in the case of this, I think this is a hexagon or sextagon set. Yeah, this would be the odd one. You know, it's because the lines are overlapping, and so you just can't see the difference between the different lines. But it is quite interesting. So even number sides, fewer fringes than odd numbered. And like I said, the triangle had, this is the one that just really is interesting. But anyway, so I think that's consistent with what I had speculated a couple of years ago. I had talked about the idea of each surface creating diffraction in both directions. And it's a symmetry. It helps with the symmetry argument for understanding the pattern. So I'm just saying it's useful in more than one way. But you know, this is interesting. So the real point is here. So he's doing an argument about QED, quantum electrodynamics, which has as its premise that it doesn't matter where the photon goes in to the compressed media, the compressed space, and that no matter where it goes, it's just a random probability of where it ends up. And this sort of indicates it ain't so random. You know, it seems pretty obvious that this line is created by photons that get close to this line, and this line is by photons close to this surface, and this one is by photons close to this surface. And it seems, again, maybe the fact that it looks that way isn't, we shouldn't fall for it, but this might be a case where, yeah, if it quacks like a duck and walks like a duck and all that bullshit, it's a duck. So, alright, so we'll go to his, you're just saying, why, you know, what the, you know, I have to ask, you know, what the hell are you thinking, asshole? I mean, I just don't understand what you've already made this argument that somehow you don't think I'm making any kind of solid criticisms. Like I haven't discovered anything and revealed anything in terms of exposing inconsistencies and flaws in your theory. And I think that's just an insane accusation in light of the fact that you haven't explained a single criticism I've made beyond vacuous, empty, well, they always fake photographs. And you can't expect a gravitational lens to behave like a real lens when that should be exactly your expectation, especially when you have the same image being lensed hundreds, maybe thousands or hundreds of thousands of light years away from each other. What? There just happened to be a little ball of dark matter way over here and a little ball of dark matter right over there, and just you know, just the right amount to create an image. And let's understand that the primary argument in terms of the lensing argument is what's missing, and one of the primary things missing in all of the galactic pictures, all of the pictures of the entire universe, are the lensing images that have the big bright blobs, like where something close, like a flashlight, like a little star that's close, right? You get a big giant flare. None of those images exist. So not a single one of the lenses in space has something close behind it. It's always 4 billion light years away. There's never anything just, you know, 1 million light years away. Ever. Because yes, it would be hugely bright as seen through the lens. So where's his response to that missing piece of evidence? That glaringly missing piece of evidence. Alright, that when something's out of focus, it doesn't mean it's not still making photons that you can see. That simple argument. A lot of photons that you should be able to still see. You just won't see them in focus. That's what lenses can do. That's what lenses would do. is the important point. So anyway, let's play this piece of scummy shit.
Particle physics.
So he's playing some video on QED that's explaining it apparently to idiots, for dummies. He watches a lot of for dummies and for retards videos. It's probably his favorite. Especially special retards. So if it's a video for especially special retards, you know, ass retards, then yeah, he's probably really into that. But anyway, so he doesn't even provide a link to this stupid piece of shit video, yeah, which he should. You know, if you're going to bother provoking a my fake analysis, why don't you just make it easy for me to do the real analysis?
Is a mind-blowing subject that really does teach you a ton about the world around you. By smashing two particles together, you can learn about the most fundamental rules that govern the universe. While we call our theoretical understanding of the subatomic world the standard model of particle physics, that actually is a little misleading. It's not a single theory, but rather several theories.
Okay, several theories, right? Cobbled together. And that makes sense to Daftloday. Daftloday thinks that's good.
That are cobbled together. And not all of the component theories are of equal precision. But today, I'm going to talk to you about the most precise theory ever invented by mankind.
Okay, so again, he doesn't think that's an exaggeration. The most precise theory invented by mankind. When, you know, again, we did the whole human genome, for fuck's sake. Evolution is probably a lot more precise.
Called the theory.
Whoa, the most precise theory ever. Did you just say that? But ever invented by mankind.
Quantum theory ever.
Yeah, well, it probably still shouldn't be a theory if it's all that precise, should it be? I mean, you don't see that kind of rhetoric has no place in science. You can't even concede that, wow, that sure isn't anything Newton would have ever said. That's really unscientific.
By mankind. This is called. And not all of the component theories are of equal precision. But today, I'm going to talk to you.
Not all of them are equal precision. It's the most precise theory yet. Man, there's lots of components that aren't so fucking precise. I mean, what the? So he's directly contradicting his own emphatic statement of his huge precision, and then he just basically says, oh yeah, but even though it's the most precise theory ever, it's a lot of shit in it that's not very precise.
The most precise theory ever invented by mankind.
The most precise theory ever invented by...
So he does the same thing twice. See, this is Daftlodays' usual retarded style. Poorly done, and this is supposed to be funny, apparently.
Mankind.
This is called the theory of quantum electrodynamics, or QED.
Whoa, who knows about this? DraftScience, come on. What's this about?
So, again, I'm the one who has actually made videos saying I kind of like quantum electrodynamics. Before they turned it into quantum mechanics, that was a good idea, okay? And then they sat there and dumped the antiparticles into it and fucked it all to hell. But the basic idea that stuff went in and stuff came out for very precise rules, that was a good idea, okay? That, you know, the idea that you didn't create particles and annihilate particles, all that was good idea stuff. Yeah, and they turned it into shit.
Have you anything to say about this?
So just what is QED? Well, from the first term in the name, we can imagine that it is related to the quantum realm. And the second term in the name tells us that it is...
Oh, right, quantum realm. That's all bullshit. You don't need to think about this anymore.
Okay, again, so I'm not even going to play this. It's just so bad. So obviously I've used the word quantum. I, again, love the idea of recognizing that the universe can be broken down into quanta, into quantities of things called energy or motion or momentum, and that it isn't made out of fudge. It isn't made out of an analog pile of crap. No, there's a real digital amount, and that you can go down to Planck constants. I really like that stuff. I'm so very never made a video against those ideas. And yet again, he's saying, you know, he's sitting there ridiculing the word quantum when where have I showed that I have any contempt for the idea of quantum? Oh, you're just such a jackass.
What? DraftScience will say, it's bullshit, so now we know. Forget about this, boys. It's just nonsense.
Right. So that's all I say. I don't say something logical like, you know, when you look at the evidence, and it started with this Young experiment, and how they over exaggerated this as a mystery needing solving when they already had Newton's rings 200 years earlier, okay, glaringly showing you exactly the same pattern. And so Young didn't sit here and introduce some new phenomenon. It was a phenomenon that was around, whatever, 170 years earlier. And I'm saying, how could they possibly turn this into some excuse to create wacky ideas like photons split in two, photons have radar, photons don't have a position in space and time, and they don't know where the hell they are, and yet they're one of the most reliable things in the universe. They travel billions of miles across space and end up exactly the same distance away from each other, kind of thing. And this asshole is going to mock me? Shit.
Nothing here, nothing happening here, no need for any scrutiny. DraftScience will tell us it's bullshit. He'll show us it's bullshit.
Yeah, well, that's the difference. At least I'll put up something. You're claiming that you have some agreement with this. You will not say the words, yes, there's a lot of weak evidence founding the conclusions of general relativity, the axioms of general relativity, and a lot of weak evidence regarding the axioms of quantum mechanics. And you won't say those simple words and say the evidence really needs to be better. If you're going to push a theory this hard, the evidence should be better. You can't even say that minimum statement. You're such a fanatic.
I'm making a video telling us it's bullshit.
This is about the motion and interaction of electromagnetic forces.
Bullshit, electromagnetic forces. You mean waves? DraftScience have told us.
So again, another perversion. We know that the forces themselves don't wave until something perturbates them. Okay, they're not inherently wave-like. Okay, and the idea that the forces aren't made of something. So again, he's comfortable with the idea and defending the idea that we should have these three different ethers running the universe. The bent space ether, where you can also shove regular hard energy into it somehow. You can actually make ether force, whatever that would be. And then you have this electro and magnetic that just happen to be perpendicular for no explained reason. But the one of them doesn't seem to have any effect because it seems like a logical person could recognize that electrons and protons are actually magnetic monopoles. That's why they make substances magnetic when they're on opposite ends of the substance and the substance becomes magnetic. It's because the electrons and the protons are magnetic monopoles. And you can't even figure that out. And you're insulting somebody else's intelligence. So again, you're going to get buried with this crap. I mean, I request of the future, if I die too prematurely, please harass the fuck out of this jackass and make sure he goes to his fucking grave knowing he was a douche. A big, fat, stupid, self-described as a retard douche who should just fucking shove his goddamn fat head in a fucking toilet and see if he could wise up a little.
Things like waves. Come on. I bet he could demonstrate and rip this entire video apart. He'd like make calculations. He'd show experimental flaws.
Yeah, like make calculations. Like what kind of calculations? Let's see. Einstein did the brilliant calculation to make lensing possible of saying, well, I'll just divide by 2, you see? Because the photon is actually time dilated while it's traveling through the gravity. So it has the perception that it's traveling twice as long in the gravity. So because the photon thinks it's in the gravity twice as long, and we know experimentally it isn't, it doesn't actually spend more time in the gravity. But anyway, because the photon thinks so, we can divide the equation by 2 and cut now we can make the angle of possible viewing of lensing twice as big by just dividing by 2. And then another great mathematical thing we can do is in the single slit experiment of a slit this big, we can mathematically say that's not a point source, that's a huge slit. Yes, gigantic. So we can make 2 photons come out of that. 2 point sources are in that little slit. And then we have the same slit next to each other, but it's exactly the same slit, same one. And all of a sudden now, no, it's just a point source right there in the middle. And this was just a point source right there in the middle. And they're just creating round waves. Because we have math that can do that. fun math, scientific math. And then when we want to find gravitational waves and we have a 10 to the minus 44 number indicating it's impossible, we'll just use another mathematical gimmick and just divide by 2 and get rid of half of our problem. And now it's possible because we just divided by 2. Yes, your math is so fucking special.
Whatever you're saying, you call yourself a professor, you're a professor of bullshit, so says DraftScience.
They say that success has many mothers, and that is true of QED as well. Well, fathers in this case.
I don't think he said he was a professor, but whatever. He's a guy from Fermi Lab. I don't know if they're technically professors, but whatever.
The first step forward was made in 1928 by Paul Dirac, when he successfully wed quantum mechanics and Einstein's theory of special relativity.
Okay, so this is supposed to be a successfully wed quantum mechanics and special relativity. Yet, is there any evidence of this wedding? I mean, did anybody really think that really was accomplished in some kind of substantial way? You know, there's lots of people saying that incompatibility still exists, and the way Dirac did it was to create what we call now antimatter. So this is where they just open the door. Now, Daftloday all good with this. This is a great way to do science. You run into a problem, you just invent the invisible antimatter, or you invent the invisible dark matter, or you invent the invisible dark energy. And that's really good science. It's just to invent little God particles and call them, and they're actually God particles. They actually are. Because they're just like a God. They're just made up.
Bullshit. Can't have can't have two momentums, light can't have two momentums. It's all based off that.
There were many other contributors, but the ones who got these...
Yeah, so that's not a reasonable fact to recognize that photons only travel in one dimension at a time, and they go the speed of light in a straight line. That would be a silly thing to do.
Explicit credit.
No, right, science. Come on.
For the theory were Richard, but the ones who got the explicit credit for the theory were Richard Feynman, Julian Schwinger, and Sin Itiro Komanana.
Oh yeah. Feynman just says, oh, just accept it. Yeah.
Well, I can play quotes of him saying that. All right, I don't understand how. I don't know. Just do the math. There's quotes of him saying it. For fuck's sake.
I don't know how it works. Don't do anything to that.
Yeah, there's quotes of him saying exactly that. And that's those science you trust, is when the scientist who actually invents it or does it doesn't understand how it works. That's to you comforting.
What Feynman says, isn't it, not science? It's a load of rubbish. All the rubbish.
They shared their
Boo!
1965 Nobel Prize in Physics for the...
Boo! Yeah, they got a fortune off the Nobel Prize just because they're all corrupt. Yeah, boo!
Yeah, now I never said anything like that, but I don't think you actually get a fortune, jackass. It's actually the fact that you get recognized that just makes your time. You can get interviews for, huge amounts of money and for making appearances and that kind of stuff. So, yeah, it's not just the prize money, asshole.
All three of these guys were crucial contributors, but it turns out that Feynman's formulation is the easiest to understand.
Easy. It's a lot of rubbish is what it is.
Well, look, Feynman's, the fact that he did his little timing circle and stuff, it could all be explained what the gimmick was. He was just measuring how much distance the photon travels, and as it's traveling the distance, it's going through the cycles of the atoms. So, I've explained this, but the percentage is kind of obvious. It goes from 16%, down to 0%, and then back up to 16%, and then back to 0, and then 16. It's a pattern. And as you go deeper into the pattern, you'll always end up at certain stops with the same amount of distance, proportionally. And so even though you're doing the whole distance, the fact is that you're always stopping at the same exact place when you're doing something that reliably always happens the same way, like me throwing a tennis ball at a surface or something and hitting a little spot, the same spot on the ground with the tennis ball. It's always going to do the same exact thing because the pattern of probability will always match because the timing always has to match. Especially with photons aren't tennis balls in the sense that photons are always moving the same speed, so they make the math kind of simple.
And is that he came up with a series of pictures called Feynman diagrams that stand in for the equations, and it makes the whole process very easy to picture.
So these are, like I said, I've said in the past, I like Feynman diagrams because it's just stuff in, okay, and then stuff, conservation is preserved stuff out. Then Feynman started doing with all the new exchanged particles, the antimatter, and so this process of one electron being disturbed, it changing the force, which is this, the squiggly line is the photon. So that's representing the force being excreted from an electron. And then the another electron feels the force and it readmits, say, a photon or an electron or whatever this would represent. And clearly that happens, and clearly I think that's logical, okay? But they've turned it now into the first event is an annihilation event. The annihilated residue somehow coalesces because it interacts with an antiparticle, and then it creates a new electron or something. Some kind of bullshit like that. So they've turned it into rubbish. But I've always said positive things about the basic idea of that simplicity, because I think the universe is that simple.
Easy to picture, like a model is a picture, like you can like just picture it. It's just all mathematical bullshit. Pictures are bullshit because the mathematics is bullshit.
Now, before we get into that,
DraftScience will sort you out. He tell you exactly why it's all bullshit.
Right. So I'm just saying, if you're going to bother making this critique, you could actually do it somewhere close to accurately about what I'm critiquing. You know, instead of picking the parts where I actually support that, and I've never made a video against it, and yet you're claiming I'm against it. I mean, you just see, you can't help yourself but to lie constantly. Even when you're making some kind of bad joke, you can't help yourself. You just have to compulsively lie.
I should let you know that to do a QED calculation depends on two crucial components.
DraftScience knows each one of these crucial components, DraftScience is going to tear you and your asshole with, yeah? Because the two components, they're like built off.
Yeah, well, we know what the components are going to be now, Daftloday, and it's something you've complained about. So he's just such a duplicitous hypocrite. They're now doing Feynman diagrams by creating particles from the future. So they get a particle from the future to interact in the Feynman diagram, okay? And then when they get to the future, they put back the borrowed particle. And, you know, this is strange reasoning. And no, we should just all eat it up. We should all lap that up. You know, borrowing particles from the future. We should all just eat that up. Oh, man.
You know, made up mathematics, or they're built up from multiple momentums of quantum light bullshit.
First is an idea called perturbation theory.
Oh, perturbation. I know DraftScience can't even say perturbation, right? But
perturbation?
And the same with the other guy, you can't read it, but can't say perturbation theory, but DraftScience will tell you exactly why perturbation theory is just a load of rubbish.
It's perturbation, not perturbation.
I made a video that talked about that in detail, and it would help you if you want.
Yeah, I don't have to consult your detailed bullshit, because I know it's all bullshit, because DraftScience has told me it's bullshit, and he'll review this video for himself. He'll say exactly how it's bullshit. Mathematical bullshit.
But the basic idea is that if you're confronted with an equation that is too difficult to solve, you replace it with an approximate equation that is easier to solve.
Now, so who knew this is what perturbation theory meant? That it just means, well, if our math doesn't really work very well, we can just cross shit out and say, fuck that. That's too complicated. That factor's too messy. That one goes infinity on us sometimes. Screw it. Just put little lines through it. And that's not a problem either. I'm all for who the fuck. I couldn't give a shit if you're calculating Mercury's orbit, you get it off by a foot. I couldn't give a shit. So I'm saying I'm all for approximate the fuck out of this stuff. As long as you understand the principles and what you're getting rid of. The detail you really don't need. I mean, there's a ton of shit in all kinds of equations where you're saying, no, I don't need the answer to 0.00005 decimal places. So let's get rid of all the math that has something to do with 5 decimal places, because I don't need that.
So you're just saying it's all based on approximations. Approximations are all wrong. It's all bullshit. Yeah, what they mean is they fudge it until they...
No, well, what it means is they have this license to fudge, okay? They have the license to do these derived equations where all of a sudden somewhere in the equation they say, well, we don't have any of these variables, so we'll just take this equation and make it equal to 0, and then we'll find its inverse anti-equation, okay, and then we'll combine the anti-equation with the real equation and it'll explode into some sort of perfect equation. I mean, it's some kind of bullshit like that. I mean, so, you know, instead of just trying to say, well, why don't we put the variables in and actually see if the equation works, they just keep sitting there and doing derivatives of the same equation, and then come up in the end with some reduction of the equation that you don't really know whether it has anything to do with where the equation started, because anywhere in there could be a misplaced minus sign or some other, they didn't square root it and they didn't, sine theta it. To say that this is, beautifully elegant logic, this mathematics, is, in my opinion, laughable.
Until it fits what they want it to fit.
As long as the corrective...
DraftScience, now I can just tell you that bullshit off the top of my head because I have faith in DraftScience to be able to say exactly why it went wrong.
Approximate equations are similar, you'll get a reasonably correct answer.
Bullshit.
So let's understand, he's making this video because he has faith in them. He thinks quantum electrodynamics and antiparticles and borrowing from the future and dark matter, completely contrived merely to fix broken math, preposterously unrealistic expectations of gravitational lensing, and then gravitational waves made out of insane theories where you convert matter into some sort of radiation that isn't really radiation, it's really bent space ether. So it's bad on you, asshole. You obviously don't understand any of these concepts, and yet you have faith in them. Because you're dumb.
If you approximation shit, you get garbage in, garbage out. So,
and if you need a more accurate calculation, you just use a more accurate approximation.
Yeah. So where is it? Where is it? These accurate? These accurate calculations. I've looked all over the internet. I can't find no accurate. And not only that, DraftScience has looked all over.
Well, I think it is almost funny that they call it perturbation theory when the theory is basically let's just jerk the math off. They ought to call it masturbation theory.
Over the internet, and he can't find no exact calculations either.
The second idea is that...
So this is his response to the fact that every single person who's doing the math publicly on the internet isn't doing it right. The true way, the honest way. And that's okay. They're all doing the same cheat. They're all saying a slit this wide when it's a single slit, Huygens's, and 2 photons come out. And then when the same exact slit is next to another slit, exactly the same size, that somehow now, no, only 1 photon comes out. And he says that's logically solid. Everybody should say that's, yes, of course that you're allowed to do that. That's the scientific way. The scientific way is to not have controlled experiments. You don't make control so you can see the changes in your results. You just change the results. You just change the principles. Just say, yeah, let's just change all the constants whenever we need to. There's nothing has to be consistent. Fuck consistency. Fuck treating experiments the same. No, that's for assholes. That's not for science.
Every Feynman diagram that you see is really just a pictorial depiction of an equation.
Yeah, a load of bullshit. Stick diagram with twirly twirly is equal to an equation. What a load of bullshit. And DraftScience will explain what crap, a lot of crap that is.
Again, like I said, I had nothing against this. You can't find a video of mine where I'm criticizing Feynman diagrams. So, like I said, I don't think the theory behind it is correct, but the part I liked is at least it obeyed conservation, which was very appealing.
Yeah, because I don't understand it, but DraftScience, he knows.
He has another video that goes into that in a deeper way.
Yeah, like I'm going to waste my time looking at how squiggly stick diagrams equals highly complex differential.
But for right now, just remember that when you see a diagram like this, it's actually standing in for equation. And every diagram has a coordinate.
Well, it's not really doing all of that. So again, I don't even understand how they get away with that, because it's such a generalization that obviously it has no precision. The diagram, it's just demonstrating where there's symmetry, and so it makes symmetry visually obvious. So you don't need the equation because the symmetry is visually obvious. I mean, you can see it right there. The symmetry is so fucking obvious.
Corresponding equation.
And there's like a gazillion Feynman diagrams.
Okay, so with those ideas out of the way, what we can now do is talk about QED.
All right, we've not even been talking about it, have we not?
So suppose you wanted to simply calculate how 2 electrons scatter when you shoot them at one another. If you have any classical physics training, you'll no doubt think in terms of an electric field pushing the two apart.
No, it's bullshit. It's all.
Okay, so there's no so Daftloday thinks that their understanding of of magnetism is so complete that they can't be fucking this up completely. So they already have the answers. They don't need anybody to say something like, well, if you thought of the electrons as magnetic monopoles, you could understand why they deflect from each other. Because like magnets repel, like charges repel. Not too complicated. It has nothing to do with anything electrical. It has to do with the fact that the charge idea is the same as the magnetic moment.
There's no electric fields. They're just they don't fly apart. What's happening is one shading the other from the.
Just pointing out, there is no need for an electric field. It's all magnetism. Electricity is just the byproduct of moving the magnetic fluid, so to speak. All right, and the electrons are obedient to it. So we see electrons move. That's the what we call electricity. But what caused them to move was magnetism. Now, that's too bizarre a statement. And Daftloday knows better because they have such a good theory of magnetism, and quantum mechanics explains exactly why magnets attract and why they repel. They have a great explanation. Oh, wait a minute. That's right, they don't have any.
They fly apart.
However, this is, after all, quantum electrodynamics, so we're governed by quantum effects. And one of the big things here is that the electric field is now quantized.
There's no such thing as an electric field. Yeah, they're just quantums of quantums.
Rather than a big and amorphous force field, the electric field...
So again, the fact that his theory provides no insights whatsoever, and yet he's so arrogant and obnoxious and saying, oh no, there can't be any new perspective that could make understanding magnetism simple, like polarization. Like I said, just bury this fucker with this. People on the street, nag this asshole, please. Because it's just being such an asshole. I mean, he just had no reason to make this video at all. Because he's not standing on the ground of, he's defending good science. He's defending rock-solid evidence. No, he's defending rubbish evidence and totally exaggerated claims. And he's doing it with such passion and aggression. He's such a Borgite and a dumbass.
Field is created by a series of individual and discrete photons.
Yeah, well, partially agree with that, don't we, DraftScience, yeah? But, I mean, I don't know why it works quantized, you know, and I have no mathematics that says exactly what will happen with the scattering functions.
Well, you do have mathematics, so what are you arguing? Maxwell's mathematics works just fine to explain this, but it doesn't do it with all this extra fields and waves and all that kind of stuff. It does it with quantizable energy, real little bits flying through and making things happen. They can be represented as real little bits of energy. They can be understood that way, just like Einstein's bent space can be understood to be an external pressure, and it fits, Mach gravity fits gravity. And the same thing is true. Mach magnetism fits all of Maxwell's equations. You stupid, dumb fuck.
Of these electronics, but Feynman's DraftScience is mathematics, inverse square law, basic quantums. That's all you need. I don't know why can't he have a Nobel Prize for saying I'm stupid.
Thus, the right way to think about the scattering between a pair of electrons is that the two particles exchange one or more photons. As one electron...
What do you mean the exchange? There's no exchanging. There's just shadow.
Okay, so again, he doesn't even ask them that question. So that he's mocking the very idea that somebody would ask the question, well, what do you mean a virtual photon just pops out of the electron? It just pops out and it goes to the other electron. The other electron says, oh, I'll send you one too. They just magically poof. You know, and that's a good enough answer for him. They come from nowhere. They don't lose any energy in the process. Somehow it's magically energy neutral. This exchanging stuff somehow doesn't require any energy in.
There's just shadowing quantons. What you have is some go straight through and some get deflected at 90 degrees.
No, the magic field provides the energy. The magic field energy. The field energy they never describe as real. It's a magic field of it.
And that makes polarization, and the polarization just makes them go apart. Yeah, they don't exchange anything, do they, DraftScience?
Okay, so he just said something so silly, right? I mean, I only say, of course they're exchanging in the sense I've talked about the quanta being sitting there going back and forth between the magnets and reflecting. And here he is saying, I'm saying they don't exchange. I mean, I just, this is so insipid. And that, what are you doing, you fucking dumb cunt? I mean, clearly my model fits exactly what is happening. Is there's a bunch of exchanges of real energy that happens to be in the field of the universe.
Photon, it recoils, as does the electron that absorbs it. If multiple photons are emitted and absorbed, the outgoing electron trajectories will reflect the contribution of all emissions. Since we don't know in any specific scattering between two electrons what's going on, we can sort of draw it like this, with electrons coming towards one another and then leaving the interaction.
Right, and that's good enough for Daftloday, okay? That's how magnets work. Two magnets get close, who the hell fucking knows? Blah, blah, blah. They repel or they attract. Who knows? Who cares? Not interesting. We don't want any details. We don't want a theory that actually explains what's in that little poofy cloud. No, let's all stay stupid like a Daftloday.
An amorphous blob that indicates our ignorance of exactly what is going on in the collision. However, what we can do is employ Feynman diagrams to show that what the blob represents is actually just the sum of all things that are possible.
Yeah, that blob, that represents...
Yeah, right. So he didn't catch on the words all the things that are possible. So again, so Daftloday really thinks when the photon goes into the slit experiment, it doesn't matter how close it is to the wall or whether it goes straight through the middle. It all does the same random thing. Okay, it's all randomized. Photons have no character. They have no reality. They're just this blobby stuff that doesn't really go through anything. Even though they're the smallest discrete particle known in the universe, they lose all their discrete nature when they... Oh, a slit's coming. I have to completely lose all my discrete functions. That's your theory, dumb fuck. Yeah, drink another Coke. Your brain food, right?
Your theory. Yeah, your big theory of bullshit represented by one big fat blob of make it up as you go along. I'll let DraftScience continue with the analysis. He'll show you.
Right. So anyway, so who's provoking a fight? Who's like I said, we have a video where okay, let's turn it off for a day, and he couldn't go one day without just playing a stupid dumbass game. So yeah, fuck being nice ever again. I won't make that mistake again. Like Piro, you're forever dead. And I hope you get what you deserve in life. You're just an obnoxious life troll, reality troll. And the sooner you get what you deserve, the better. You piece of steaming shit. You dishonest piece of crap. Nothing in this fucking critique was at all honest. You're the ones with no answers. I'm the one with a plethora of answers. I'm the one that's unified physics. You're the one that has no fucking clue. So fuck you till dead, you piece of shit. Ugh. Disgusting, smelly piece of barf. Oh, we did a video on consciousness. Yeah, I got a whole 6 minutes. The 6-minute mark is where it all goes south. This is what I think. Consciousness is just fake. It just happens with ones and zeros in your brains, and so it can't mean anything. I mean, even though it's an arrangement, a precise arrangement that creates like the image of butterfly, and the arrangement would be a precise arrangement that creates horrific pain, it doesn't mean that horrific pain means anything. Just like the butterfly you see in your brain isn't a real butterfly, the pain you see isn't a real pain. So you can make as much pain in the universe as you want. Isn't that great? We can all torture everything because it doesn't mean anything because it's not a real butterfly. You see? That's really how fucking dumb this piece of shit is. Fuck. God. Anyway, yeah, well, I'm not doing consciousness videos on this channel. It's just silly. Oh, God. Ugh. Because it happens in a brain, it means it doesn't happen in the universe. That's his theory. Your brain, inside your brain, that's not part of the universe. Nothing can happen in there. Nothing meaningful. No value could possibly be created inside of a brain. Dumb shit. Alright, so I'll do some comments to get the hell out of here. But yeah, I hate you fuckers. Lanai, a Kia official. So he doesn't make very many comments. I'm saying, what the you know, I mean, you know, I'm sorry, but sometimes even my allies look like assholes to me. So anyway, your red blue green thing is inverted in OBS. Well, I quite obviously knew that. That's why I fixed it in the video. I actually fixed it while I was making the video. And it's obviously not something I broke, it's the software broke it. Why would it invert the colors when it didn't invert them the day before? All of a sudden now they were inverted, and they were inverted for no reason, because I didn't invert them. So yes, I went in and inverted them again. You know, even though I didn't invert them in the first place. Shit. Why they are even invertible in the first place has got to be a question. Why the fuck don't these fucking camera drivers know what colors the camera's producing? It's only producing 3 and it can't get them right? Anyway, should be somewhere in the settings to fix that. Yes, I understand that. Fuck you. I mean, if I couldn't have fixed it in the video, right? And if I was like, oh, how do I fix that? I can't. Then that comment might be salient, but I fixed it in the video. So I don't know what this person is. Some sort of Eskimo or something. Here's a video of a conference given by LIGO Collaboration. Oh, I'm so excited. Also, it may be of minor passing interest to you that letters from one of Einstein's personal private correspondents are coming to auction. Well, that's really classy. So, but yeah, I don't really give a shit. Einstein's, you know, as a person, Einstein was a sack of shit, frankly. And I don't think he was much of a scientist either, so yeah. I mean, I have a sympathetic root for him thing still in my head. It's like I still want to root for him because he's Einstein. But yeah, the more you know, the less there is to root for. Alright, Michael Fulwell. Glad you found the video interesting, Gary. As you're aware, I don't benefit from the visuals. Yeah, I should have explained the visuals a little better. That it's a sphere of water sitting on a little cone pedestal. And they inject another big water bubble inside the bubble of water. So it's a round sphere of water, and then there's a round air bubble on the inside, and they're both attached to a base, so to speak, that vibrates. And so there's little bubbles of water created inside the inside air bubble, and the little bubbles of water, because it's space, can bounce around quite freely. But anyway, let's see. So something about, oh yeah, I can get a good deal from Ken Wheeler on the camera. Yeah, no doubt. Alright, so John Tron's second cousin. I don't even know what that would mean, but it's a creepy name, creepy looking face. I've been watching these past 2 videos. He accused you of replying to the sentences out of context. So again, this replying out of context thing, when you're actually, you know, sitting there reading the comments, I just, you know, are playing a video. I don't know exactly how the context could have got lost somehow. I didn't steal it. I didn't quote mine. So context was there. Everybody, if you know what the fuck he was asking, then why don't you tell me what the question was? Because I still don't understand what the fuck he wanted to know. What the hell he was critiquing. So he can be as inarticulate as possible, and that's just fine. And I'm supposed to have some sort of magic powers to know, oh, that pile of shit of a sentence was, you know, asking me something. So turns out he was right. So I'm just saying, the video's up. If anybody thinks there was some where I used it as a tactic, I didn't understand as a tactic. Is that what you're arguing now? I clearly couldn't understand what he was asking, and so how could he possibly be right that I was somehow deliberately not answering? Which explains why you were confused to begin with. So you're conceding I was confused, and yet you're saying he's right in accusing me of some sort of deliberate action, when you're conceding I was also confused. I mean, you people are so preposterously duplicitous. Oh, and dickless. And yes, generally speaking, you all seem to be fat. Jesus Christ. Alright, the gunslinger. You talk about gravity doesn't even address the point. Yes, okay, what is the point? If gravity doesn't always increase kinetic energy, as I attempted to explain, alright, the speed at which gravity is affecting the Earth, for example, is from the sun, is actually, the velocity is actually about a meter per second or something. Okay? So, no, it's probably less than that. But anyway, it's a meter per second. Alright, which is like 1 mile an hour. So the Earth is moving this way 1 mile an hour. And it's moving 40,000 miles an hour this way. So it's 40,000 miles an hour this way and 1 mile an hour this way. Can you get why I'm not emphasizing this direction as having much meaning when it's 40,000 to 1 ratio between the two forces? So the new vector of motion is just going to be a tiny bit off this line, and it's not going to have any appearance of this line at all. It's just this tiny bit of change in direction. And so to say, oh, there's a huge amount of kinetic energy going this way, when no, most of the kinetic energy is going some other vector not towards the sun. So that's the only point being made here, is that the amount of energy is so slight by comparison to the kinetic energy of the Earth's velocity in its orbit. That kinetic energy is huge. The amount of kinetic energy created by its descending towards the sun, it's descending so slowly towards the sun, okay, that yes, it's a real kinetic effect, but I'm just saying by comparison it's 1 to 40,000. The ratio is preposterous. Why would you even waste time worrying about it? You could leak that much energy and you wouldn't be able to see it, is the whole point. The Earth could be leaking that and you wouldn't be able to measure it because of the scale difference. 40,000. The loudness of the Earth's motion this way would be so loud that any motion it was causing some other direction would be, under perception. God, so stupid. Then where does the absorption go? So again, it goes in the sense that the Earth is in a frickin' circular orbit. Yes, it's always falling towards the sun, but the location of the sun is constantly changing. So if you put it on a straight line, you'd recognize that the sun is always changing, and so the vectors add up to the two opposite ones in the same direction. So in a sense, it's all conservative. So yes, the Earth causes the sun to process the center of the sun's gravity a little bit. But that's it. What do you want to know? You made a sentence-by-sentence reply again and didn't get to my point, nor did you even make one in return. Again, I don't know what your point is. The energy is really absorbed when the sun is falling towards the Earth at 1 mile an hour. So as the Earth falls towards the sun at 1 mile an hour, it's absorbing energy. That energy causes the sun to move a little bit, 1 mile an hour. The center of the sun, a mass the same size as the Earth in the sun. So 1/1,000,000th of the sun moves, 1 mile an hour towards the Earth. Right? And they keep doing that. But because they keep doing that at opposite angles, all it turns into is a circle. The whole solar system is going like this. So what? It doesn't go anywhere. It's all consumed by the opposite reaction. I still don't know what he wants to know. Fucking idiot. I want to know how you replied to my point about the interferometer. So this is some other thing. I already had another way to say the argument. So again, this will be another inarticulate pile of shit, no doubt. When the photon, let me see if this stuff is centered. Yeah, it's pretty good. Good enough. I already had another way to say the argument. When the photon moves towards the mirror and the mirror is moving away, that's like an expansion of the distance in your word. But because the mirror is moving away, it takes a long time. Yes, and it'll take shorter time on the return trip. So again, what the fuck is the point? Yes, it takes more time for light to travel a longer distance. Yes. Long time plus expansion equals big expansion. How does that even make sense? The amount of extra time is exactly consistent with the amount of extra distance. There's no, you don't multiply those things or add those things. What are you talking about? On the return trip, the photon beam splitter are headed towards each other. That's like a contraction of distance, but because the two things are headed towards each other, that makes a short time. Yes, so what? How can how long the amount of the change in distance between a foot and a foot minus a zilliometer, I mean, it's not even a millimeter, be consequential? I just don't understand how that can mean something to anybody rational. But anyway, short time plus contraction equals small contraction. I don't know. Says you. Then big expansion plus short contraction equals expansion. So again, he's still saying that somehow there's some leftover expansion stuff, and I don't see how that's a rational claim at all. The two things don't cancel out as you claim. So he's saying that making the distance a tiny bit longer and then making the return trip a tiny bit shorter don't cancel out. Well, I say they do. There is a net expansion when the interferometer moves. It can't move faster than the speed of light. So how is that possible? If you move the interferometer really quick, then all the photons don't hit the mirror, idiot. If you move them as fast as the speed of light or something, how can movement possibly change anything except the location on the mirror where you're hitting the mirror? And then your angle is going to be different, and the photon's going to go somewhere where it's not going to reflect. You can't move the device anywhere near the speed of light, or even half the speed of light, or even quarter, or anything near it. So you clearly aren't going to be changing the distances, the orientations of the two measurements by anything that could matter in terms of distance, because then the mirrors won't reflect to the same place. The angles will be different. You can't understand how the angle of the mirror is going to be different when you turn the mirror this way. The photon's not going to know that you moved the mirror. Shit. You can't just say that everything is moving so it all cancels out. It doesn't cancel out. Well, you say so. We disagree fundamentally. I say you have absolutely no evidence that there's any leftover residue of the fact that the path length on something as short as a few meters, you can detect the difference in the amount of distance. I said 0.8, as a joke, but we know the real distance and real length would be 0.8 times 10 to the minus 20 or something. Dumb fuck. Yes, when you keep implying that theory can't account for the double slit width, so he has width instead of width, you are making a false implication. When you keep implying that the theory, what theory? Huygens, use Huygens in the single slit, create two photons. Don't use Huygens in the double slit, point sources, create just one photon. Same slit, one slit creates two photons, the same slit in another circumstance it creates one photon. Two in one, one in the other. So we shouldn't have consistency of theory behind experiments. It's okay to have inconsistent theory behind experiments. It's been shown that it can. Well, nothing has been shown, so that's just a lie. There's been nothing shown. No taking the experiment, plugging the numbers in, and showing the math working. That hasn't been shown at all, ever. By the way, speaking of the fact that the pattern consists of rounded edges, doesn't that show that it's not made of bars? It may well. I think that's just an indication of the fact that you're stretching it. So anything you stretch, if I stretch a square from the center points, it's going to round. So that might be all it is. But the important fact is that you don't have any explanation for it. It's not in your theory anywhere. Why does random come out to pointed edges or rounded edges? Shouldn't random not be a rounded edge? So if the photon's going based on a random mathematical permutation, why is it rounded? I'm not going to say this is a contradiction with whatever you say, yet it doesn't, but doesn't that indicate that you're not on off bars? No, it doesn't. It just means that you've stretched something, you've stretched the image, you've distorted it by creating even more diffraction, more spreading. And as stated, as I indicated in the previous part of this video, the fact that each edge is what's creating the image. So now I'm going to modify probably my theory to say each edge is creating a duplicate edge. So they're all images of an edge. They're not images of the actual opening. They're images of the edge of the opening. Alright, clearly that would create the same idea of a bright center, and it would get dimmer at the two edges. So if we say the edge is creating it, the point would be it hits more electrons. The more electrons it hits, the more it refracts. The more electrons it hits going this way, that are disposed by probability to go this way. So it has two choices it can go, left or right, each time it hits an electron. And it's just a calculation of how many it hits. So it could hit one and go right, and the next one it hits, it goes left, and then it goes right, and then it goes left, and then it comes out straight. That could happen. But the idea would be is each time it moves 7 degrees. All right. So the point would be is that because you have two surfaces, both are creating the same line, and so you'd have the bright edge, the ones that are going to happen more often, and then the ones that happen a little bit less often. So even though they're close, they happen less often, and the other side is doing the same. Well, I have to draw a picture of that, so just ignore what I just said. Well, most of it, parts of it, because there's no point in doing it without a picture. By the way, speaking of the fact that pattern consists in rounded edges, okay, so we did that. And the equations can be done for the 2D case. Look, it's a one-dimensional happening, okay? There's this way. There's no forward, back, clearly, and there's no up and down. So this is just a nonsense argument. I don't know why you're pursuing this. It's silly. You don't get to dismiss the 1D case. How am I dismissing it? So again, there's just a preposterous. Where did you get the notion that I'm dismissing it? Where are you getting this notion that I don't understand that it diffracts this way, and that's what they're accounting for, is the diffraction in one dimension? There's no other dimensions considered in the experiment, idiot. Okay. You don't get to dismiss Newton's equations of gravity. Now he's on gravity. Does anybody understand this? Because it doesn't account for speed. Again, where did I dismiss Newton's equations? Where did that ever happen? I've been pointing out that knowing the speed of that gravity has a speed is only important in when doing the most delicate of gravitational equations. It doesn't mean anything in 90% to 99% of the stuff you want to know. And it's only when you're getting really down to being explicitly accurate do you need to include the speed of gravity. But anyways, you can do, I mean, it's such a small difference it makes that somebody did it like 100 years before Einstein, they did Newton's equations with gravity having the speed of light. And the point was is that, yes, while the equations worked a little better, it wasn't enough of a difference for everybody to go, gee, that's amazing, that must be the speed of gravity. But anyways, you can do the math in all dimensions anyways. Well, I say whatever. For both slits and the square aperture. Well, why don't you do it for the triangle for me, buddy? Or the all the odd numbered shapes. People have already compared the square aperture to a simulation of it, and it still works, so don't bother. Yeah, so that's always your attitude. Don't bother looking into anything, because you can depend on us. Yeah, no, I can't. You are obviously gullible dupes. So expose UK. Let's see. What the fuck? If the photon / electron act like this bead in the two-slit experiment, it wouldn't have even hit the detector at the other end. Yeah, exactly. I mean, that video is just so bad. I should have been even more brutal. Because when you think about when he showed the two patterns, and he showed how they were matching, and you're saying, how could he have possibly done that? And the only way they could have done that is they must have screened and only counted the little droplets that went into the slit straight. So they didn't count any of the ones that hit the sides. So the only way they could have possibly done that is they had to just count the ones that were in semi-straight, because then you could get deflection in the two directions a little bit. And of course they compared it to the simplest, the widest two-slit pattern possible. The widest openings. I mean the narrowest openings. So the pattern that has the fewest features and is the most least interesting is the one they compared it to, of course. Look, it looks just like the single slit. Except not when you do the single slit the right way. So anyway. So Superior Mind says, yes, the explanation you provide regarding tension, pressure, and geometry and forces between electrons make perfect sense. Yes, it's very good. So this explains why we get the various shells. Nice, yes. So the gunslinger had to throw in here. How many electrons does the first shell have? And Superior Mind answers, so 2 would go in opposite sides to best repel each other. And see, it's all about sizes. So one has to assume that a hydrogen atom is incredibly small, because the distance, so their 2 electrons stay opposite each other. Where are you? Well, 2 electrons. That isn't right. But you can have 1 electron. But anyway, clearly it's just about the fact that they're so close that if you put a third in, the reason why the shell won't hold more than 2. So that's what's the limit on how many you can have in a shell. So the first shell can only have these 2 because it's so close. You see, the shell distance is really small. And so you put a third one in, then these distances get too strong and that just explodes out. It can't do that. The pressure can't hold that. So it's when you get to this next shell, now you can fit whatever it is, 6 or 8, you can fit 8 in there and maintain this distance. So it's just about the distance between the electrons. Each shell, the maximum is the pressure between the electrons. So the pressure between the electrons in every shell is the same. That is the distance between them. So it's like this image in a way. I guess I can use the comparison of this this thing here. So if you look at these hexagonal shapes, you can see that the side gets shorter for each one. See, each of these gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So the thing that's getting, so if you force that distance to stay the same, you could see that this object would get much bigger. It would be really big, and this object would be big, a little less big, and this one. So just think of it in the sense, if you leave this distance has to be the same in every orbit, then you can get why there's a limit to how many can be held in each orbit to maintain that distance. Alright, so that sort of explains Let's go back to the crappy comments. So I guess I'll leave that comment by the asshole. I should just block him because his rudeness continues, but what the fuck. I would like to hear your explanation using much better graphics. Okay, magnet field lines. Yeah, I have to, I have to admit that was a pretty poor drawing I did. Even the second video. But the point being made, it just seems so freaking obvious. So I'll draw it in regular pen. Is that field lines are just a lot of little magnets that end up, it's just magnetic material. So they're whether they're made of actual magnets like ferrofluid or something, or whether they're made with things that can become magnetic ferrous material. The idea is that makes a bunch of little magnets, and all the little magnets will line up the same. Let's see if this is in view. So so the main strong magnet, okay, the magnet itself, okay, north-south, is radiating these little lines of radiation that are polarized. It's all backwards, so I can't really use my fingers as a tool because everything's upside down and backwards. So there's lines coming out of this. These are the black lines, the red lines at the bottom, whatever, however you want to look at it. And that forces these magnets, these little magnets in these here, to all line up exactly the opposite. That is, they all have their south end up this way and their north end this way, which makes a new big magnet, you can sort of see. And then these field lines, these magnets end up repelling each other. That's why they don't just fall right, crash right into each other. That's why there's a gap between the lines. And the gap is going to be decided by how heavy these lines get. That is, how magnetic they become by how much mass they capture. And when you have enough material, that will be consistent. But that's really what's happening. It's just the magnet creates magnetism in the material. The materials create new magnets, and those magnets line up exactly the opposite to the original magnet, and they repel each other. Alright, anyway. So, enough. Hopefully no technical issues of any major proportion. Yeah, Daftloday is just such a fucking asshole. I'm not going to waste time doing buffoon videos, but I think I will make a video of all the unanswered questions and just list all the issues that I've pointed out, all the flaws in general relativity, bent space, time, space, bendable dimension, time as a bendable dimension, all the theoretical nonsense, and all the crap with the stupid wave obsession of quantum mechanics. All the questions that haven't been answered. Why in photons isn't there a wave distribution in the actual light pattern? The math says it should be. Why isn't it obeying the math that's supposed to be perfect? The most proven and dependable math in the history of mankind. Well, why isn't it perfect? It's supposed to be perfect. Why isn't it perfect? Because it's not perfect. Because it's a piece of shit. That's why. Fucking idiots. You're just such dupes. I mean, again, not one of these cranks has been willing to say their evidence is weaker than they wish it was, or they would like it to be better, or they realize that they probably should have better evidence to be so obnoxiously arrogant in defense of their theory. They just won't admit that it's weak evidence.